Yeah, so am I being recorded now?
Yes.
Switch off for a moment.
Yeah.
When I was at the Royal College, and I took that emaciated figure, which, with the cast I've got of that in plaster, which took ages to make a plaster cast of it, up to, with other things, with another friend who was in the same year at Wallasey who'd got in the Royal Academy schools. And we decided to have a joint exhibition at our own school to say, what happens to us when we leave. Professor John McGill, who had had chosen one of my terracotta things for an exhibition, and therefore he said, "Oh, I remember that." But I had to model a head, which I had done before, so I just about knew how to do that. And it took about two days an interview, and anyway, I did get accepted there. And the Slade, I said, was just I got another friend to take my folder up to the Slade, which is at the other end of London, and all these people I kept asking to cart things around for me. John McGill said, "Sculpture's a slow business. I think you ought to. I can write to your local authorities and get an extra year for you." So I had 4 years at the Royal College. Then had a travelling scholarship with a small grant. Well, again, that's another phase. I was going through my religious phase, which went on for about 10 years. But I was looking at the Romanesque churches in France, which are the best selection of Romanesque stuff that's around. And yes, I was cycling around with my camera and photographing things. And I can talk about my religious phase.
Yeah.
My mother was dying of cancer, bowel, whatever it was. It was way back. They were talking about 50 years ago now. The thought of my mother dying, I probably was more a mother, not fixed child, but more so. My father was so remote and so shy, and had a religious conversion. And then they said, "But you haven't been christened," because my parents didn't believe in christening. So I said, "Well, christen me baptise me in the Thames." "Oh, we can't do that. It's far too dirty." And they borrowed a Baptist church, and the Baptist church didn't seem to mind, but they did it in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son,
Oh, wow.
in the name of the Holy Ghost. And at that time I was almost drowning because you meant to go under once.
Yeah.
I went under 3 times. But, anyway, that was that. So I was still a believer at that time. And then my sculpture then became, I was trying to find a new religious language. And I've been looking at some of Mexican stuff, and the idea, when Mexicans got Christianity, all the blood was so important for them, and also they would have some of the sequences, the birth going up to the resurrection. I thought, that's an idea that I could do that. So I was working on crosses, and that was the final result. That was 9 foot tall. Which was in an exhibition in Liverpool. So it had all the roots, the torture, all the whatever, and then the empty tomb and the resurrection, all combined in, to me, was new symbolic terms. And so my Christianity continued, though I never believed in the idea of the resurrection anyway. So, your life is here. You know, why have another life?
Yeah.
Will get boring to continue forever.
Yeah.
My first teaching was at Liverpool School of Art.
Is that
I
when you taught John Lennon? Yeah.
Then I went to Bradford, and they put me into a silvering department and said, almost implied, you know, they want to wake up and think of new ideas. And I had no idea how to do, and I learned how to do some silversmithing. And then I was casting out, pouring wax into water to get lovely sort of bubbling things and making like strange jewellery with it. And I was selling them at the Blue Coat Chambers in Liverpool. And I gathered a group of teddy boys came in and thought, oh, what a lovely weapon. And they went round clobbering people with them. So I've designed weapons as well, that's right. Unintentionally, but that was that. Then I'd met Madeline, still at the church. So she was slight outsider. She was a nurse and looked quite strange, very black hair and quite broad structure. She kept on writing to me, wanted to keep contact. And eventually we did meet up again and things started again. And then she said, I want 6 boys. I said, well, I can only guarantee you possibly 1, but we had 2, in fact. That was the start. And we were living in a very primitive little cottage in Yorkshire. And there was an outside loo which you could look up towards the vicarage. So the vicar could see you on the loo, but it didn't really matter anyway. But, we got divorced, though we still remained good friends. And well, when I met up with Magdalene O'Dundo, who's the potter, you could see that pot over there, and that lovely African face. That pot was made specially for me, because that hair around it, she'd never done that shape again. This idea of mixing up bits of imagery from different periods is something that's fascinated me for ages. I mean, this is right down, but the sea is there, and the sea will come up and smash the concrete and twist the railings. And of course, there are all sorts of anti-aircraft guns during the war, of course. And we're much as a field where that thing was, which was, as the cat can say, you know, the famous saying in Liverpool, we have Mersey Goldfish, which are all the crap that comes floating out from the sewers. Competition for bells for Northern Ireland and odds. This was right at the time of the millennium, and I entered drawings and things, and they quite liked it. And then they said, "Yeah, well, can you go ahead and make me 8 bells, which should have a range of notes." Loughborough used to have a bell foundry, and I'd done some work with them before, and they knew me. And I said, "Look, I'd have to cast some bells. Can you give me an idea about size and weight?" So the note, and they gave me all that information, which I've got printed out there. Then I said, "Of course, I'm putting wings on the top." I said, "Well, that'll change it." So it didn't change it, but we had to adjust the tones a bit. We went, and I used to scrape some more bronze off the inside, which brought the tone down. I made some chimes as well, but I made some chimes, very Irish actually, about the idea of, one, I'd seen an image of a bell that for some reason had holes in it, and it was a very sad, like a moaning sound, so it was said. And I tried to make chimes that had, like idea going to the next world, which is very, he's passed on, will be said in Ireland, but I mean, or he's even more explicit. The Irish had a wonderful expression to explain somebody dying, and and I went to Kells, and I said, Kells are supposed to have 3 crosses, and the guy said, well, we did have 3, but a bus knocked it over, and we've only got 2 at the moment, but we will have it. And that did happen when about 40 years ago, 50 years ago. When I was at the Royal College, I had a great friend who was in the ceramic department. He wanted to do sculpture, but for some reason they said he wasn't good enough, and so he ended up working in ceramics. But we went round London deciding which was the best bit of sculpture in London. And we decided it was the Burghers of Calais behind the House of Commons. So we decided, well, we'll choose the guy holding the key because we could stand on his hands. And then we climbed over the bridge at night, obviously, and had to put clay all the way around it, about that sort of thickness, and then make a 2-piece plaster case. So that was very much a ceramic sort of thing. And then we'd take that off and get rid of the clay, and hopefully the muck wouldn't matter. And then we needed 2 buckets of gelatine, because then the only casting material was available was melted gelatine, which took nearly, 2 buckets of gelatine would take nearly all day to melt, or you end up burning it. And then we said, we've got no transport, but we've got a guy who had a motorcycle and sidecar. So I climbed over, was in the park. He turned up with the buckets, but hadn't brought the buckets out, but passed me the clay. And then this police car came along. He was a private constable. He showed me all his particulars, and he said, what's in that packet? I thought we'd been smuggling drugs from the river, which is very obvious.
Yeah.
And I said, no, it's clay, and we're art students. We're going to do some modelling by night. Why would choose to do it there? And he said, oh, bloody art students. Got in his car and drove off again. And so we gave a cast to our professor, who thought it was wonderful, and several other people cast the plaster face. And it wasn't until many years later that I decided I've got to get these 2 halves to go together. So I've got to work out what that bit of clay would be, only about that thick. And I went down with a pair of steps and met up with my younger son, and in the middle of the day, and said to the park keeper, look, you don't mind, I want to do a bit of modelling. And he said, oh, yeah, that's all right. So all the Japanese photographers were photographing me. But, so I worked out what was missing, and then made a new mould of it, and then we got bronzes out, and hence we have bronze of Rodin. But I had another idea of there's another one of Rodin, which is up in Dumfries. A private landowner who obviously loves sculpture and got a cast of St. John the Baptist done by Rodin, and he's a wonderful athletic figure. And his lower hand, I thought, that's low enough for me just to reach. I could just about, but I have to do it by night. And I had my current girlfriend with me at that stage, and she said, look, you don't want you with a shot up your bum. So
what was it like teaching John Lennon? What was he like?
Well, again, it's a bit like being in church. So he was very quiet and very focused, and he had a very good line, and I was teaching in the more conventional way, which, yes, but light would come in and it would make it look more like form, and I can't remember that I got him to do that or not, but again, then I was offered this teaching over at Bradford, which is foundation students, but also a whole range of other things, which was full time, and I did some ceramics there, which I sold, and other bits and pieces. Then I had offered a full-time job. That was only part-time. I did that for about 3 years, and my first marriage was there, and my first 2 sons. No, first son was born, not the second one. Second one was born at Preston. And then I did a model of Madeline pregnant, which I did a sculpture that big of her pregnant. And she had it until she died, 6 months ago. But then, yes, I think my art was going through slightly, not cubist, but slightly angular sort of feeling. And, it kept developing and changing. And
when did you move into this barn? So it was just an empty barn, and then you kind of created it?
It was, And I kept saying, I want to find somewhere where I can have a studio. And there was nowhere in Cambridge, and it was so far too expensive. Cambridge even then was expensive. And then this barn, which only had thatch on it, tarmac on the floor, and approached the farmer, and eventually he said, well, he'd been trying to sell it partly for somebody wanted to make it into a museum or something, and that fell through. So I bought it for £67,000 with the land as well. Again, that was incredibly cheap. And then, of course, to get the converting to somewhere to live took another about 200,000 to do it. And we had to borrow, I had to sell all my collection of enamel signs, which I had nearly 40 of my enamel signs. I've kept only 2, I think. But anyway, lots of things got slowly worse. But we were together for nearly 20 years. So the first, I mean, you've seen my Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and the first bit was pretty amazing. And but the aluminium, I used to make casts of cabbage leaves, especially the Savoy cabbage, which had a wonderful texture, and get a wax off from that, and then, make casts of carrots for legs, and, make these wonderful discs. Most of my ideas start off quite vaguely, but to say, well, I think wood might give me feeling for that softer form, but I want harder forms, so I might use bronze or metal. So it was dependent. Then I say, I want transparency somewhere. I can use clear resonant perspex. So when the ideas develop, you can bring in a media that sorts it out. So that mixed media really is part of my thinking or my unthinking, rethinking process, whatever you call it.